Hello. Welcome to our exploration of a dark chapter in British history. Today we delve into the medieval period, a time often shrouded in mystery and romanticized in tales of knights and castles. The medieval period, often romanticized, was a time of immense hardship. Beyond the grandeur of castles and the chivalry of knights, the common people faced daily struggles. Disease cast a long shadow over the land. The Black Death, one of the most infamous plagues, decimated the population, leaving towns and villages in despair. Life was a constant struggle against invisible enemies. The lack of medical knowledge and poor hygiene made people vulnerable to a myriad of illnesses. Join me as we journey back to uncover the horrors of disease in medieval Britain. We will explore how these diseases spread and the impact they had on society. Imagine a world without modern medicine, no antibiotics, no vaccines, and no understanding of germs. People relied on rudimentary and often ineffective treatments. A world where a simple cough could be a death sentence. The fear of illness was ever present, and the sight of a sick person could send waves of panic through a community. This was the reality for people in medieval Britain. They lived in constant fear of the next outbreak, knowing that it could wipe out entire families and communities. Their lives were constantly threatened by outbreaks of deadly diseases. The plague, smallpox, and other illnesses claimed countless lives, leaving a trail of sorrow and loss. These outbreaks were terrifying and devastating. The sheer scale of death and suffering is hard to comprehend today, but it shaped the course of history and the lives of those who lived through it. The Black Death stands out as the most notorious killer of the age. It was a catastrophic event that reshaped the course of history. This bubonic plague swept across Europe in the 14th century, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. It spread like wildfire, affecting every corner of the continent. It reached Britain in 1348, carried by rats on trading ships. These ships, laden with goods, unknowingly transported the deadly bacteria. The plague was swift and merciless. Within days, entire communities were infected, and the death toll began to rise alarmingly. Victims suffered from agonizing symptoms. The pain was unbearable, and there was little that could be done to alleviate their suffering. Swollen lymph nodes, fever and chills were just the beginning. The disease progressed rapidly, leaving victims weak and delirious. Black boils covered their bodies, a telltale sign of the infection. These boils were painful and often burst, leading to further complications. The Black Death killed an estimated 1/3 of the British population. The sheer scale of the mortality was unprecedented and left a lasting impact on society. Entire villages were wiped out, homes were abandoned, and the once bustling streets became eerily silent. The dead overwhelmed burial grounds. Traditional burial practices were abandoned as the number of corpses grew. Mass graves became a common sight. These communal pits were filled with the bodies of those who had succumbed to the plague. The stench of death filled the air. The once vibrant towns and cities were now shrouded in a dark, ominous atmosphere. It was a truly apocalyptic event. The chaos and devastation caused by the Black Death were unlike anything the world had ever seen. The social and economic fabric of Europe was forever altered. Faced with such horrors, people turned to the limited medical knowledge of the time. The medieval period was a time of great uncertainty and fear, especially when it came to health and disease. With the constant threat of plagues and other illnesses, communities were desperate for any form of relief or cure. Medieval medicine was a blend of herbal remedies, bloodletting, and religious rituals. Apothecaries would prepare various concoctions from herbs, hoping to alleviate symptoms. Bloodletting was a common practice, believed to balance the body's humours. Religious rituals were also integral, as many believed that divine intervention was necessary for healing. Physicians had little understanding of the true causes of disease. Their knowledge was based on ancient texts and theories that were often more philosophical than scientific. They relied heavily on trial and error, and their treatments were as likely to harm as to heal. They often relied on theories of bodily humours and astrological influences. The alignment of stars and planets was thought to affect health, and physicians would consult astrological charts to diagnose and treat patients. The theory of the four humours, blood, phlegm, black bile and yellow bile, dominated medical thinking. Superstition and fear played a significant role in shaping responses to outbreaks. People were terrified of the unknown, and this fear often led to irrational behaviours and beliefs. They would cling to any explanation, no matter how far-fetched, to make sense of the suffering around them. People believed that diseases were punishments from God. This belief was reinforced by the Church, which saw plagues as a divine retribution for sins. Religious processions and acts of penance were common, as communities sought to appease what they believed to be an angry deity. They sought solace in prayer and pilgrimages. Many would travel great distances to visit holy sites, hoping for miracles. These journeys were acts of faith, driven by the hope that divine intervention could bring an end to their suffering. Others blamed marginalized groups such as Jews for poisoning wells. In times of crisis, scapegoating was common. Accusations against Jews and other minorities led to persecution and violence, further compounding the tragedies of the time. Living conditions in medieval Britain exacerbated the spread of disease. Most people resided in crowded towns and villages. Sanitation was poor. Waste disposal was rudimentary at best. People lived in close proximity to their animals. The lack of hygiene, combined with malnutrition and limited medical care, created a perfect breeding ground for disease. Outbreaks were common. They could decimate communities in a matter of weeks. The fear of disease was a constant presence in people's lives. Death was an ever-present reality in medieval Britain. Infant mortality was high. Life expectancy was short. People were accustomed to seeing death around them, the cry of "bring out your dead." From plague carts was a chilling reminder of the times. The dead were often buried in mass graves. There was little time for individual burials during major outbreaks. The sheer number of dead overwhelmed the ability to cope. The stench of decay permeated the air. Section 6. The Church's role, seeking solace in a time of plague. In the absence of scientific understanding, the Church played a central role in providing comfort and explanations. People turned to prayer and religious rituals for protection and healing. Priests administered last rites to the dying. The Church offered solace and hope in a time of great fear. It provided a framework for understanding the suffering that surrounded them. People sought meaning and divine intervention in the face of unimaginable loss. Section 7. The social fabric unravels. Fear and mistrust abound. The constant threat of disease had a profound impact on society. Fear and suspicion eroded social bonds. People avoided contact with the sick. Travel was restricted. Trade suffered as markets closed. The Black Death, in particular, led to social unrest and upheaval. Labour shortages disrupted the feudal system. People questioned authority. The established order was shaken to its core. Section 8. A glimmer of hope. Lessons learned and a changing world. Despite the horrors, there were glimmers of hope. The experience of devastating outbreaks led to some improvements in sanitation and public health measures. Quarantine regulations were introduced. Efforts were made to isolate the sick. The understanding of disease remained limited. However, the seeds of change were sown. The horrors of the Black Death and other outbreaks forced people to confront the challenges of public health. Section 9. The strength of the human spirit, survival and adaptation. In conclusion, the horrors of disease in medieval Britain were profound. Outbreaks like the Black Death left their mark on the land and its people, yet amidst the suffering there was also resilience. People adapted to the ever-present threat of disease. They found ways to cope with loss and fear. Their strength and determination to rebuild their lives offer a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit.